Hello, everyone. My name is Ian Scarfe, and welcome to tonight's program. This is part of the Piano Break series by the Ross McKee Foundation, and I would like to give a special thanks to everyone at the Ross McKee Foundation. You know, since March and since the pandemic has disrupted, all of our lives so much, I've found it, there are so many things that we're all struggling to deal with, and for me, it's been full of interesting challenges trying to adapt my career, to the current normal. A life of presenting music through recordings and through live streams, concerts on YouTube and Zoom. It's not at all, I think, what any of us prepared for, and it's been certainly a big challenge. But the point is that I'm very grateful for this opportunity. So thanks to everyone at the Ross McKee Foundation, and thank you to you all for joining us today. Today's program is one that I've called Water Music. There are countless examples over the centuries of music that has taken inspiration from water, whether that be the ocean, or rivers or lakes, or the fountains, in Paris or Vienna, or even the rain. There are so many examples in the piano literature, and I thought that tonight I'd just share a few of those with you today. Some of them are rather familiar, and some of them are unexpected, or rather newly discovered gems. The first piece on the program is one of the latter. This is a piece by the American composer Florence Price. Florence Price was born in Arkansas in 1887. So she lived right around the great turn of the century years and in the early decades of the 20th century, when musical modernism was flourishing everywhere. As an African-American woman, she had trouble sort of finding her way as an artist and as a musician, but she did earn acceptance to the New England Conservatory in the very early years of the 1900s. As the story goes, I believe she told people there that her family was from Mexico. That was an attempt to sort of avoid the sort of blatant racism, especially in New England in those days. In any case, Florence Price had a long career, and she composed just an incredible wealth of music, symphonies, concertos, songs. I would describe her style, as a kind of an American romantic style. She did draw some influence from blues and African American spirituals, and kind of synthesized that into her sort of Western European training. This piece is called Placid Lake. It is a rather short, sort of impressionistic view of a placid lake. For me, over this summer, I've sort of missed out on a lot of my normal traveling, whether that be concert tours or vacations or family visits. And I think at some point, just the vista of a nice lake in the evening, that really appealed to me. It's one of the things I kind of miss here in San Francisco, is that kind of escape. So I hope you enjoy this piece. This was written in 1949, just a few years before Florence Price died. Placid Lake. The next piece on today's program is by Frédéric Chopin. This is from Chopin's magnificent book of Preludes for the piano. This is his Prelude number 15 in D-flat major. This piece has picked up a nickname over the years. It's often called the Raindrop Prelude. And, there are all of these stories behind how it picked up its name. You know, when Chopin was working on these preludes, he and his lover, George Sand, they took a vacation from Paris where they went to the island of Majorca. And supposedly what they imagined as a beautiful, warm vacation on the Mediterranean turned into a cold and dismal and rainy time on the island. That's perhaps one story behind this. But what draws me to this piece is how you can hear elements of this in the music. The idea of raindrops is right there from the beginning. Not so much in the melody. Normally our ears are drawn to the melody. And in this case, Chopin gives us a typical, beautiful lyrical melody. But the raindrops and the interesting part comes underneath that in the left hand, which is a very simple accompaniment. And the way that he hovers on that A flat as a sort of a constant repetition, it really gives the whole prelude its kind of atmosphere. That gentle repetition in the background gives a kind of a calming element to the music, almost meditative. And along the line, I'm sure someone thought just like raindrops on the roof, perhaps. It gets more interesting. In the middle section of this prelude, Chopin introduces a new element in the bass, which changes everything. It's in the minor key. It's dark on the dark bass side of the piano, and it's a completely different atmosphere. But what does not change is that repeated A flat stays right where it is, and in an amazing way that our response to that repetition changes. Instead of it being a calming or gentle element to the music, that repetition becomes more threatening, more obsessive. And indeed, that kind of insistence is what makes the music build to this kind of stormy, this passionate storm in the middle. Never fear, there is a moment near the end where things resolve. It's like the clouds part and the sunlight comes through again, and we have that beautiful tune returning, just to give us a sense of resolution at the end. So I very much hope you enjoy this Chopin's Raindrop Prelude. The next piece on today's program is by the African-American composer William Grant Still. William Grant Still was born in 1895, and he grew up and sort of came of age at the height of, what we consider the 20th century modernist decades. Still was one of those precocious people whose talents in music really went all over. He played so many instruments: violin, viola, cello, double bass, clarinet, oboe. He apparently many of these he taught himself, and he also taught himself piano and started teaching himself composition until he decided on a career in music. Once he committed to a career in music, he really went for it. He got a typical training in sort of Western classical music. He went to the Oberlin Conservatory in the very early years of the 1900s. He also studied in New York with several great composers, including the French modernist Edgar Varèse. And so just thinking of his, the breadth of his experience, you have to wonder, like, well, what did his music actually come out like? The answer to that is a tricky one, because William Grant Still was always kind of refining his style, and even though his early works, in some ways, sort of went the direction of these modernist tendencies, by the end he had sort of synthesized. He took what he could from Western classical tradition, but then also wanted a style that sort of represented him as an African American. So he used music like the blues and jazz, as integrated some of that, and African American spirituals. But you still also hear some of this kind of modernist or almost impressionistic style as well. The selection I chose fits our water theme of the evening. It's called Mystic Pool. This is one of the selections from his 7 Traceries. These works were actually featured on the Piano Break series. Jennifer Peringer's program selected several of these other movements from the 7 Traceries. I found that very inspiring, and I thought, since this one fits the mood, it would fit in with our program very nicely. It is a delicate kind of impressionistic thing, and it conjures up such a beautiful scene with these harmonies. So I hope you enjoy this, William Grant Still's Mystic Pool. The next piece on tonight's program is by the French composer Claude Debussy. Debussy has always been one of my favorites. Something about the way that his music really understands the sonorities and the richness of the instrument. It gives it such a lush sound and a really kind of a wonderful feel to it under the hands as well. Debussy is probably the leading figure of what we would call impressionist music in the early 20th century. Although he hated that title, I think it was intended somewhat as a derogatory term in those years. Although he hated it, he did a little bit bring it on himself, especially in the way that he gave his musical compositions very visual titles. So there's a lot of visual imagery with Debussy's music. This piece is a perfect example of that. This is from his first book of Images, of images, and this first movement is called Reflets dans l'eau, Reflections in the Water. So here, Debussy is not very specific. You can choose your reflections that you are viewing. You can choose what kind of water, whether it's a fountain or a pool or a very quiet day at the ocean. But you definitely hear Debussy's sort of evocative sound, especially in the harmonies he chooses. There are a couple moments in this when Debussy shifts the tonality to whole tone scales, and you can usually identify the whole tone scales because they sound like they're floating. They're not really attached to any particular place. And those moments of sort of suspended gravity, they do a lot, I think, to capture Debussy's little impression in this work. So I hope you enjoy this, Reflections in the Water by Claude Debussy. All right, we come to the final piece on today's program. I thought I should mention that although I'm speaking to you now from my little studio at a friend's house in San Francisco, the recordings that I made for the performances were done while I was visiting my family last month in Salem, Oregon. In Salem, I was visiting St. Paul's Episcopal Church, where they have just a magnificent piano. It's a Yamaha CFX, which is one of their new models of concert grands. So it's a 9-foot concert grand, and it's certainly one of the nicest pianos I've ever played. Certainly the nicest Yamaha I've ever played, but it's just an extraordinary instrument. This Steinway is not too shabby, though. Maybe next time you'll hear me here. In any case, the final piece on today's program is another by Frédéric Chopin. This is his Barcarolle, Opus 60. This is one of Chopin's late works. It fits our theme of water music so nicely. A barcarolle, is a traditional Italian folk song, and it's one that you would hear in the canals of Venice. A barcarolle is a boat song that is sung by the gondoliers as they pull the gondolas, through the canals of Venice. As such, there are a few characteristics that really set the barcarolle different from other styles of folk songs. First of all, it has a very lyrical kind of melody to it. Often the melody is given as a duet, and the melody is in either thirds or sixths. You'll hear that in Chopin's rendition as well. Also, the accompaniment of a barcarolle it often has a kind of a rocking rhythm. It's usually a 6/8 or a 12/8 meter, sort of indicating or suggesting the rocking of the boat on the canals. Chopin gives us that as well. But this, in Chopin's hands, this piece is so much more than just a simple folk song. It's almost 10 minutes long. It has kind of an operatic scope with highs and lows in the drama. There comes a moment about 2/3 of the way through when all of this energy seems to be dying away, when things get quieter and quieter, and out of this incredible moment where this voice comes and this almost like cadenza, and at this moment, this moment that's always so spine-chilling for me, Chopin writes some very interesting directions for the pianist in the music. He writes over that moment that you should play dolce sfogato, and that's a term that I had never seen, in any music before. I mean, the word dolce is a common one. Dolce means to play sweetly, but sfogato, I had so much trouble finding a real a definition of what this direction meant. The best clue I got was from a friend of mine who is an opera singer, and she said, "Oh, that is something that coloratura sopranos will sometimes see, especially when they have these long melismatic runs where the notes are cascading up and down." And she said sfogato means a kind of an outpouring of emotion, an outpouring of breath, of music. And I thought that was tremendously inspiring, that this moment of real poignancy in the barcarolle, Chopin uses the language of opera to sort of create this moment. After that, you'll hear the barcarolle tune comes back in a kind of an ecstatic way, and it really kind of plays itself off the page at the end. This is one of my absolute favorite works of Chopin. I very much hope you enjoy it. Also, I hope that after today's program, you'll join us for our little after party on Zoom. There you can ask me questions in real time or offer comments or reactions on today's program. I would love to see you there. I believe that if you go to rossmckeyfoundation.org/Zoom, after the program is concluded, that you can meet us all there. Who knows, there may even be an encore in store. But for now, please enjoy Frédéric Chopin's Barcarolle.